Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. All right. Well, it looks like that council is not a favorite topic of the parishioners either, but it's important.
I think it's fun.
It's important. And so I will give sort of a brief report, and then maybe we can hear some uh, reflections from some of our other delegates and people who were there. Um, but for those who don't know what Diocesan Council is in the first place, I think that most of y'all do. It is basically where the business of the Diocese of Texas gets done. So in the same way that here at Trinity, we have an annual parish meeting where we elect our vestry and all of our church representatives. In the same way, the diocese gathers once a year and we approve the diocesan budget and we elect all of our elected officials. And, similarly, then the national church meets every 3 years and they elect a presiding bishop every couple of gatherings. And so they do the business of the national church there. So there's a lot going on, but the most important business that we have really when we gather at Diocesan Council is electing representatives mainly to the standing committee and the executive board. And there are a few other elected positions as well. And we approve the annual diocesan budget. So it's, I think it's great for people to understand how this works, and if possible, for people to go out and see how it works, because the Episcopal Church was really structured about the same time as the United States government was being founded and structured, and we have a really similar way of doing things. We have delegates that are both clergy and lay. And so you have kind of almost this kind of bicameral type of arrangement. And one of the things that I really value about the way that we run the Episcopal Church is that it is really not run just by the clergy. There's equal representative really by the laity. And I think anybody who's been to Diocesan Council will have seen that. In the Diocese of Texas, this varies from one diocese to another, but in the Diocese of Texas, every parish has 4 lay delegates. And I think every mission maybe has 1 or 2 lay delegates. 1, okay. That's a lot of laity. And it means that when we gather to vote, the clergy people are considerably outnumbered. And then when we elect people to the executive board and the standing committee, which are the main governing bodies in the Diocese of Texas, we have to elect clergy representatives and lay representatives. So every one of those governing committees and boards is structured to include both lay people and clergy people. So I think that's an important thing about the way that our church is governed, in the same way that the United States government was set up in a way that kind of showed a certain level of distrust of executive power. We set up, we gave the president of the United States a lot of power and then made sure that we balanced that out. The Episcopal Church is very similar. There's this distrust almost of bishops built into the way that we run things. And we want to make sure that the bishops have appropriate power to govern the diocese, and then that is balanced out by both the clergy and the lay people in the diocese. So those are important things to note. The way in which the business of the church is done is set up in such a way that people can get up and speak to any issue. So when one of the things we did was we approved some changes to the constitutions and canons of the Episcopal Church. And when we did that, most of the ones that we had this year had to do with changing the outdated language. Many of these constitutions were written back in the 1800s and use outdated language, and were written in a time when the only clergy people were men. And so the pronoun commonly used is he when it's talking about clergy people. So a lot of that is being updated. We changed the job description of the treasurer of the diocese. You know, again, going way back, that language has been he. It was assumed that the treasurer of the diocese had to be male for whatever reason. We've now had a female treasurer of the diocese for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, probably is how long Linda's been there. And yet we still have this language describing that, you know, saying he. One of the interesting things that came up during all of this is that it had been proposed to update some of the language to that had been written saying he as the pronoun to say he or she. So this had been proposed, and during the discussion, a young person got up and went to the microphone in front of like 900 people, which this person had way more guts than I've got, and proposed changing he or she to they, which is a pronoun that is commonly being used now as a third person singular non-gender specific pronoun. And, you know, I could hear some kind of groans around me. You know, I know that there are a lot of people, you know, I was reminded that at the ripe old age of 57, I'm already kind of a fossil. You know, and I'm like, you can't change, you know, pronouns and you know, but you know, at the same time, I really supported this. I think that it's going to make some people uncomfortable, but you know, this is the nature of language. It evolves over time, and this was a representative of the next generation of leaders in the church, and this is the world that we are moving into. So I found that, you know, it may have been controversial in some ways. I'm sure there are those who supported it and those who did not. For me, I just thought it was interesting, just to see that kind of, that was an unexpected issue. And anything that's unexpected, I find interesting. And it also just made me really pleased at the way that we run things, that a lay delegate could stand up in front of the entire council, in front of the bishops, the clergy, and everybody else, and make a proposal like that. And it wound up being approved and passed. So that was one of the really interesting things to me. We also then later on, we approved the budget, and the budget we proposed, and Barb will have some more detailed comments about this probably. You know, the Diocese of Texas, of course, has a large budget. I think our total budgeted revenue is $13.5 million, something like that. This year, this got Barb's attention. The proposed budget included something like a $1 million, about a $1 million deficit. And so this got people's attention. That's a lot of money. And again, you know, as we were discussing this and before we voted, one delegate got up and said, I would like to see a balanced budget. And this is the third straight year that we have had a projected deficit, and this is the largest one by far. And so there was just that opportunity for somebody to get up and raise that issue. The bishop and the treasurer kind of explained some of the circumstances surrounding that. And in the end, I agreed, you know, I supported the passing of this budget wholeheartedly. And we can go into a little bit of detail about why it was necessary for us to do that. But I also think it was so important for somebody to be able to get up in front of the entire council and say, we've had three straight years of deficit. This is not sustainable. Like, what, you know, we need to be thinking about this. And so to have somebody to remind us of that, I think was really important. And again, just one of the things that I value about the way that we govern ourselves. And then I'll make one more quick comment, which is that one of the things that I value the most about diocesan council, in spite of the fact that I'm an off the charts introvert who really kind of freaks out at being around that many people, is just making connections with old friends and seeing people. And so that's always fun. We had a young man come over to our table. He sought us out and he wanted to introduce himself. And he said that he and his wife had been married at Trinity about 15 years ago. It was right before I got here. And, they're now at a church in Houston. He was here as a delegate. This won't mean anything to anybody in this room except maybe Abby. His name turns out to be Jim Silliman, and his wife is Claire, Mitzi and Tom Renault's daughter. And, Mitzi was on the vestry when I got here. Claire grew up in this church, served as an acolyte when she was in high school, and now she's married off in Houston. And so I thought that was really cool to make that connection. The other people that we saw there and visited with a little bit were Lori Iserloh and her son Oliver. And again, many of you may not remember the Iserlohs, but Lori is a very good old friend of Jane Walton, and used to come and stay with them every once in a while. And whenever they were in the area, they would come worship with us. And Oliver, who at the time, again, was junior high school, would serve as an acolyte. And so he's served here as an acolyte a couple of times. Now he is on the committee for dispatch of business for the diocese. He's in college down at Trinity, I think, in San Antonio. And Laurie was here as a delegate from St. David's. And so kind of reconnecting with that family and seeing this skinny little kid who used to serve as an acolyte here from time to time when they were in the area is all grown up now and serving as a leader in the Diocese of Texas. And so that was really cool. There was one other really great personal encounter that I hope David will tell us a little about since Carla is not here. But those are some of my thoughts and reflections. Are there any questions or comments about any of that?
Say something.
Yes.
Okay. So what I thought was really interesting is whenever we were saying that, and I honestly thought that was interesting for someone to do that, because I can definitely say that I use they, them pronouns. Not everyone knows that about me, but I thought that was really interesting how someone really young, decided to step up and say that. And I definitely can say I'm pretty brave, but I wouldn't have been that brave to go in front of 800 someone people. And I thought that was really interesting because I've noticed a lot of times like you said, we use he or she, but I've noticed a lot of times that we don't really use they because some people refer to them as they. And I always thought that was interesting because also a lot of times whenever in the service, you always say anyone's welcome to our table. And I thought that was interesting because anyone's welcome and people might refer to them as they and them or theirs or whatever. And I just thought that was interesting because you always say what I've noticed at most churches that anyone's welcome. And a lot of times they don't really use they. Yeah, I thought it was them and very interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And that goes along with what I was saying about, there being generational issues here. And times change. So I think that the person who made that proposed amendment was maybe a representative, like a youth or college representative. College, okay. So again, just interesting.
There was only one resolution that had any opposition. And that was that one, and had two people stand up to oppose. And first one with a grammatical correction.
Mhm.
Because they used two at the end of a phrase and then at the beginning of the next phrase. So if you read it straight through, it would say two, two. So I thought, okay, this person is an ex-high school English teacher. And then the other person that opposed was the young woman who asked for the gender to be gender neutral instead of he, she, to be they.
Right.
Which I thought was really, again, very brave of her. And it's important to people, to some people, it's very important to them to get their pronouns right. So
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And then of course that was most of the resolutions, almost everything passed with a pretty hefty aye vote. There were only a few that got any no's at all. And the gender change in gender language was one of them. They got some no's and they were kind of grumpy no's. But
You said you heard one behind you.
yeah, I heard a grumpy old no come from behind me. But and I know part of it is a generational thing.
Uh-huh.
that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really interesting because basically those two oppositions were both grammatical issues. One wanted to kind of make a grammatical correction, and then the second one involved a grammatical change that people from my generation or older consider grammatically problematic.
And I didn't even notice that there was an issue there. It didn't even occur to me that there was an issue there until that young woman stood up and said,
yeah,
we need to use the non-gender pronoun.
And I honestly, I do agree because like you said, it's multi-generational. And what I've noticed, and even you've told me that a lot of some of the people who don't don't think it's right to have, we all have different opinions, but who don't believe in that is a lot of people. What I've noticed is some back then, because back then when older people than me, they didn't really think, back then time has changed because men weren't supposed to get piercings, none of that, and then they wouldn't and they also wouldn't and also back then men wouldn't wear women clothes, and also people wouldn't really use they them pronouns, and back then also black and white had to be separated. And I think that's really changed over time. We still have some issues with that, but it's really been changed over time how we see men and women separated, or men and women or anything like that separated, because normally you were telling me this, that a lot of times we always seem to categorize things, and we always say, okay, men should wear this and that, and then women should wear dresses, and like you said, people might not want to do that stuff because they might want to experiment with it or something like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. Maybe David, may I bring this to you, and maybe we could get a couple of quick reflections from you.
Thanks for the invitation to attend. Probably the thing that at least myself, and I think I could speak for Carla as well, that we enjoyed the most was getting to spend time with you and Mother Claire and Barb and Kim. So that was fun. So that was getting really to know here folks in the church here, since we're relatively new. The challenging was because we were very relatively new, voting and having equal vote with other people and not really, knowing any of the individuals that were set standing for committees. That was a challenge. So I had, you're right. I made a note here. There was 425 lay people and 230 clergy. So the lay folks do outnumber the voting, at least. And I think seemed like all of the committees were equal representation, 50-50. So that was very interesting.
Did they have to be there to vote, or could they vote remote?
There's no remote voting currently set up.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that during the 1 year, I guess, that we did the council entirely. visions for that, and someday we might join the 21st century. Don't hold your breath.
I don't see how,
Okay, well, quickly. Yeah, okay.
I don't see how you can do that online.
It was a challenge.
Mhm.
So, okay, yeah.
Probably from a overall business, and I, again, being relatively new, I don't know the background, but a lot of the meeting was around the bringing in of the Fort Worth group. So there was an awful lot of the meeting was dedicated to that, announcing new clergy and the churches and et cetera. So that was very interesting. I made really very two things that I thought were going to
oh, so I thought, okay, well, maybe a $10,000 deficit isn't such a horrible thing then. And then for 2023, it's $1 million deficit in the budget, but they know how to cover it. They're not, they said really the diocese is in very good health financially, and they're doing a lot of good things with the funds that do come in. For one thing, the Bishop Quinn Foundation has now fully funded insurance for the clergy. So we are no longer being assessed to pay insurance for our clergy. That's all covered now. Also, the big thing with 2023 was unification with North Texas, and that was exciting to see that and to see those, was it 2 churches or 3 churches that rang the bell, new churches that are and both from North Texas area. And then also St. Julian of Norwich and Cedar Park, that their new church was funded, and so they have a permanent home. They just had a groundbreaking not too long ago, so they're going to have a permanent home now. And there was a new initiative called Usher, and I need to find out more about this. It's the Unified System for Holistic Engagement and Reporting. And I do want to dig into that a little more at some point. Let's see. Oh, and one of the reasons that part of the reason that we have such a large deficit going in is that all of the churches, all of the parishes in North Texas have been given a pass on their assessment for 2023 because they have so much to do to get reorganized and to bring things up to date and to get in line with the Diocese of Texas. So they gave them a pass on their assessment. So that means less revenue, but they, like I said, they have a way to figure out how to cover that. And then I was really impressed that 15% of their operating revenue does go to service and outreach on the diocesan level. So that was kind of cool to see that too, that it's important. That was a big chunk. And let's see, some of the numbers that Bishop Doyle shared, 36.5% of the clergy now in the diocese are women. And so that is steadily growing, which is exciting. And half of the new clergy this year are women. And 9% of the clergy are persons of color. And again, that number is growing. So that was exciting. And there are currently 11 bivocational priests studying at Iona School. So lots of good stuff happening. But we talked about those resolutions. That was important. And again, just watching those new churches coming in from North Texas. And that was really, really interesting and a real positive thing to see. And I got an email from Claire. May I share from Claire? Mm-hmm. Okay. She says a few thoughts. She said, even though I initially groaned, I really enjoyed the Bible study. Barbara and I did this with women behind us from a church in Killeen, and I found it refreshing to hear what grabbed them and spoke to them from the gospel. And it was a African Bible study that we did, and very similar to Lectio Divina. And it was a fun Bible study. It was a good moment, and we were told to turn around and don't just do your own little group there. Turn around, meet someone new, and interact with them. And then there was a bishop. I'm not sure of his last name. Bishop High was choked up making the motion to admit former Fort Worth churches to the council. This felt like a witness to the years of trial, along with the new hope for these churches to have a stable diocesan home. I also appreciated the portion of Bishop Doyle's address, which recognized that these churches of the North region have much to teach us about creativity, resilience, and courage. I also appreciated how Bishop Doyle concluded his address with a quote from Bishop Quinn a few years after the worst outbreak of polio in the United States in 1952, something to the effect of going forth in confidence to be effective bearers and witnesses to the church way of life. I like the phrase church way of life. Being part of the body of Christ invites us to a distinctive, truly life-giving way of life. Very interesting amendment to a proposed constitution and canons. The secretary changing gender specific language, his, her to their. That again, that a young college ministry contingent brought that up and cited the gender neutral language information from the Episcopal Church in support of this amendment. This, along with deleting male specific language and proposed canon changes. And the treasurer brought that particular one only brought a few verbal no's. The Episcopal Health Foundation new director's brief report. This foundation has amazing long-term potential to be an agent of great healing. And that was all from Claire. And then I also have an email from Kim. Let's see. Kim says, it was great to be with Trinity parishioners and to hear more about their personal selves. I am grateful Trinity was willing to let me attend council again this year. I enjoy learning how the diocese works for Trinity and for all of the now 179 churches in this diocese. I found it very moving to have approximately 900 persons in a room reciting a psalm together. I think Psalm 57, along with the Lord's Prayer. And the ringing of a large bell to welcome churches both from North Texas as well as 2 new ones that within the diocese brings joy to my heart. I also recognize and I'm grateful for the effort it took for those in charge of this huge event. It was a huge undertaking and all went well. While all went back today, I was able to stay here in Galveston. My council reflection will continue and my connection to God this Sunday will include the water and the surrounding sounds of the waves. Birds and all critters in all their glory. And that's from Kim.
I think she's doing some birding.
Yes, she is. She
doing
stayed to
that?
do some birding this
Yeah.
morning.
Well, she'll be, unless that fog lifted, she'll be listening, not seeing.
That's true.
Yeah, for those that thought we were enjoying the outdoors, you couldn't see more than 100 yards maybe, just socked in.
And by the time I left, you couldn't even see the water. The fog was so heavy, you couldn't even see. It was just across the street, but you couldn't see the water.
Yeah.
So,
Where was this morning?
no, in Galveston yesterday.
Oh, okay. It was supposed to, we're never supposed to get real foggy today.
Well,
Awesome, thank you very much. And maybe we can hear a little bit from Lisa. Lisa, again, was there as a representative of the seminary. And had you been to it?
I had not. So I was asked, we have 4 seniors from the Diocese of Texas, and I'm one of the 4. And I said, sure, I'd love to go. And after a 4.5 drive through Houston, and we were at a separate hotel and we checked in and walked in. And the very first person I see is Barbara. And I'm going, oh, my heart was so happy. It was an interesting viewpoint from being from behind the table. So we had an exhibition table like this with Seminary of the Southwest and talking to various people, but seeing people come and go from my end. And then my very first Friday night with the bishop's message, my heart was so full seeing the laity there. I was so excited that people wanted to donate their time. You know, they could be doing all kinds of things, but they chose to come and represent their home parish. And I thought, what a sacrifice. And then seeing all the youth, there were multiple youth, and I was just going, these are future leaders. So I found it all very encouraging. And they have a processional in with many of the church's banners. And that was exciting to me because I do like that pageantry. The music was wonderful. Services were in English and Spanish. Well, it was a combination, some in English and some in Spanish. We had Spanish music and we do that at the seminary too. We have a Tuesday. So that felt very familiar. So one story about Carla. When I first walk into the exhibition hall, I see David and there's Carla looking through a fair trade shop that was set up. So that was exciting. And then yesterday on Saturday, I see Carla, David has this notebook and she went to go pick up some. I said, Carla. And this other woman from Prairie View turns and says, hi. And I'd never met her before. And then she said, And then going right with Dave's story, this Carla says to oh, you're Carla. I'm Carla. Is it with the C or a K? So that was fun. And then Claire comes up to the booth and I talk with her. And then another person from the seminary starts talking to Claire. I'm going, no, she's here to see me, not you. I want her all to myself. And then Dave walks by and it's Dave. I got to get some coffee. I'll be right back. And so it was all these worlds colliding because my sending rector and our new associate, and then my previous associate is now the rector at St. George's, and all these people kept walking. We're like, I love this, and that it's like a giant family reunion. So if you've never been, I encourage you to hop on that train and get on over there. It's just so affirming to hear, like Barbara said, 35% are women. And I'm going, yeah. And I know so many now, and that's encouraging. And what was it? 22 new deacons?
Really, 22.
I thought that's what, and I'm going, that's amazing.
Vocational deacons.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's just all the statistics that I usually don't get into, but Bishop Doyle has a wonderful way of making statistics sound fun. So that, yeah, I loved it.
Oh, awesome.
I see that hand.
We have to go to the choir.
Okay.
Were any important decisions made?
I'll leave that to the rector.
Okay.
Really the most important decisions had to do with the passing of the budget,
Okay.
and the elected official, people to the standing committee and the executive board. And we also elected delegates to general convention, which would be 2.5 years, I guess.
Oh,
They're
okay.
gonna do a new
They
presiding
will
bishop.
be electing a new presiding bishop at that time.
So that's pretty big.
So it is pretty big, yeah. So, and there were lots of votes that had to be done. So it was very funny to see they kept projecting up, the results of the vote, and this person was elected, but we need a runoff now between these two people. And we thought we'd taken the final vote, and then they came and projected the vote up, and it showed another runoff. And this was about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and a groan kind of went through it. There's just, oh. So we voted again, but it all worked out. So, and yeah, I'll be happy to share more with y'all about that. I know y'all
That's great.
have to go
Thank you,
say.
So I believe.
No, not at all. Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that.
And I do encourage anyone who has any interest to be part of it, if you can, because this is the second time I've gotten to go to council, and I enjoyed it. I willfully take the spending money. Because there was several places there in the exhibition hall. This is one of my purchases.
Kim got one.
Nice.
And this was made in the Holy Land, and the money goes to support women in a battered women's shelter there in Diocesan. So,
Wow.
and then with a fair trade booth there, there's really beautiful articles. But I find it really interesting to see the way the church is governed on the diocese level. And then I was fortunate to go serve as a volunteer when the national convention was in Austin several years back. And that division between the House of Bishops and what's the other house called?
Deputies.
House of Deputies. And I got to sit in on the House of Deputies meeting, and it's equal laity and clergy.
Mhm.
And the laity has an equal voice in there. And then anything that the bishops decided they wanted to do has to be approved by the House of Deputies. So they can't just make a blanket decision that this is what we're doing from now on. It has to get approved by the clergy and the laity. So I think it's exciting to see that, see it work.
Absolutely. And for those of you who might be interested in going next year, it's going to be in Waco. So a much easier drive. I never thought I would be so excited to be going to Waco.
Well, I heard a rumor that it was gonna be in Fort Worth, so. But I'm so glad Waco's.
Yeah. Waco, especially with the addition of that northern section, is as close as we've got to something that's central. And so it, boy, from my perspective, it sure beats driving to Galveston or the Woodlands. So, but someday I expect that we will be meeting in Fort Worth, which seems fair.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, next February 9th and 10th in Waco, Texas. And actually, we all have our prejudices. I mean, growing up in Austin, I thought of Waco as like, why would anybody want to go to Waco? Waco has turned into a pretty cool town. And the convention center there is really nice. There's running trails right there along the river. I think it's a great place to council. So I'm looking forward to being back. We have we've in the past, when we've gathered there, we have worshiped in the Baptist church. Was anybody with us when we were in Waco years ago?
Yeah, I think we were too, but
The
I can't.
Baptists allowed us to worship in their big, giant, beautiful church. I mean, it looked more Roman Catholic than
Huh.
Baptist. And they granted us an exception to serve wine during communion.
Wow.
So that was mighty hospitable.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, so that'll be fun. We also, I will have to confess, I'm glad that Lisa went to church because we missed. We were eating dinner together and it took us a long time to get our food. And we had walked about 30 minutes each way to the restaurant. We ate at Guido's. We had a fabulous dinner together. And I was very sorry to miss the opening Eucharist, but it was worth it because we had great food and we got to spend some time visiting, which was really a lot of fun. And so,
Christine helped serve.
oh yeah, Christine, she was part of the liturgy committee that planned that worship service.
That was fun to look at. Yeah. Christine. Branson.
Yeah, that's cool. Let me say one more thing before we go. And then if anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask them. But this is a little bit off topic, but you were talking about seminary and somebody talked about Iona and all that stuff. I received a copy of the letter from Bishop Ryan to Ashley Harper Oberly this past week, informing her that she has been made a candidate for holy orders. This is a huge step. This is a huge step. So the way that it's changed a little bit since I was in seminary, but now they do that the middle year, correct? And so my assumption is that Ashley will be scheduled for ordination in about a year and a half. So probably June of 2024. But that is just such a huge hurdle to get over. So very, very pleased and happy for her. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, she's worked for a long time to get there.
Yep.
Do you expect she'll be ordained here?
The ordination to the diaconate is usually done with a group, and it's usually done at the cathedral in Houston. And then the ordination to the priesthood is typically done at the church that you are serving. So the assumption is that after she is ordained to the diaconate, she will be placed as the vicar at one of the mission churches in this area. That could be within a fairly large geographical area, but given that we're kind of on the edge of the diocese, there aren't a whole lot of options that I can think of. Lago Vista might be one. Burnett and Lampasas both have are both mission churches, but I think they're both able to support at least a part-time clergy person right now. So wherever she is placed, that is where her ordination to the priesthood will take place. But it'll be close by somewhere. She'll she'll have to drive there. That's one of the stipulations of the bivocational priesthood, is that she's got a job here and she has to stay here in Marble Falls. And so they have to place her somewhere that is within driving distance.
I think it's like 70 miles or something like that.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, it used to be a little bit a shorter distance, and they've increased it, I think, just because, but I hope that she doesn't have to drive quite that far. That's a lot of driving.
Yeah.
Anyways, very proud of Ashley and happy for her. And y'all have seen this. Y'all are in EFM with her. I think a lot of it has had to do with her being an EFM mentor. Part of it has to do with Iona School. I think it has to do with a lot of things, but I have really seen her grow in confidence in the way that she, just the way that she handles herself. And so it's really great to see her kind of growing in that way. And she's going to be great. So, any other questions? Well, thank y'all for being here. Thank you again to the delegates. Appreciate y'all making the long drive and representing Trinity so well. We stayed out of trouble, and that's something. And it really was. It was a productive council, and we're very fortunate to be in a diocese that is not experiencing any major conflict right now, and that is able to serve as an agent of healing as we see dioceses coming back together. It's good stuff. All right. Well, thank you all so much.